Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast. This is WTS 288, and my name is Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan.
Mero, how are you as we record this dark and dreary and rainy Tuesday evening?
I'm good. I'm very good.
Yeah, I'm in good spirits, as they would say.
Yeah, I feel good.
I must say at the opening of the show, I just want to say that it's I find it a bit weird, right? And like I've talked about like when I went for surgery and all that last year and all that. We've talked about it on the podcast and one thing and the other. But I'm still kind of I find it weird like that people will check in on me. And I don't mean that in a bad way, just I'm kind of like, geez, I didn't think people would care. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And just a couple of people had messaged me over the last week or two who listened to the podcast.
Really?
So yeah. So I put up a thing on Instagram anyway, just like to say like how I was getting on and whatever. And Jesus, lads, the amount of that sent me a message out the back of it, and just thanks. My head couldn't get any physically couldn't get any bigger. But
Unreal.
Jesus, I feel
so you're down 80 kilos.
Oh, just over 80 kilos. Yeah, I'm not.
And the target is?
It's weird. At the start, I didn't really have a target, but then there was just something about the 100 kilo mark that just made me go, go for it.
So then when you get to the 100 kilo mark, your
Yeah.
aim will be not to gain any more weight?
I think there'll probably be so like they say anyway with what I've had done and all that like you lose heavily for say 6 to 9 months, and then kind of starts to taper out and whatever. And after about 12 to 15 months, you kind of you have a stabilization period, and in that stabilization period, you might put on maybe a couple of kilos as your body kind of says, all right, enough now, kind of thing, you know. So there's my goal is to get down to somewhere between 110 and 115 kilos. I think for me, where I was and for me height and me build and all that kind of thing, that walking around weight I'd be comfortable with. Do you know what I mean? So if I get something like that, but ultimately if I'm below 120, I'd be ecstatic. I know there's probably some people who are like, geez, 120 still, but I mean, I was 212. So like
Below 120 in total?
Yeah, if I got below 120, I'd be thrilled.
As in your total weight?
Yeah.
212 at your heaviest?
Yeah.
So 124. Fucking hell, man.
I didn't really have a goal as such. I was just kind of like, I'm just going with it. And the main thing for me is that I feel healthy and I feel great and a bags of energy and I'm loving life, right? So that's the main
You're regular?
Regular-ish. There's times when I have to order the cable in for it to be laid, Graham.
Love it.
Here's a sentence I didn't think I'd be saying. But my maths is slightly off. I don't. Anyway, look, the main thing, I'm feeling great. I'm doing deadly. Loving life, and just thanks to people who reached out. It's very kind of you. I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, appreciate it.
Love it. Well done.
Yeah, I mean, right, we've just finished recording this, and I mean this in actual, like, I'm genuinely uplifted, right? But I just don't know really what to say. So I think maybe the best thing is we just introduce our guest and then.
Yeah, as I said to the guest at the end, as we start talking to him, guest first and foremost is a gentleman. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. Trying to get
amazing spirit.
Yeah, trying to get him on, no pun intended. Trying to get him on for a very long time, and just it never worked out scheduling wise. But we finally got him on. It's a different direction for ourselves, but we didn't know it was going to go in this direction. When I reached out to the guest, and me and Danny said, let's have him on the show, we never said that we were going to go down this road. So anyway, look, we're going to talk to a friend of ours. He's a pastor. He is a therapist, and he's PayPal's global welfare officer. And he is a gentleman, and his name is Bob Carley. Joining us now is the legendary Bob Carley. Bob, thanks so much for your time. I've tried to get this. We're 8 years old. We've known you about 5 or 6, and I've been trying to get this over the line for years, and it just never happened. And now it's finally happened, and I'm delighted. So thanks so much for giving up some of your time for us this evening.
Thank
Well,
you, Bob.
lads, happy birthday.
Yeah.
You don't look a day over 7, the period.
How are you, Bob?
This is like Granda coming to the birthday party, isn't it? This is
Yeah. I'm saving you for the eighth anniversary.
Brilliant. Yeah, how am I? I'm good. I'm actually good. Yeah, I suppose like a lot has happened in the time you've known me, Baz. I mean, I've become a grandfather 5 times, so that's been
Unreal.
Congratulations.
extraordinary. Like do you know the mad thing? And I don't know if you're like this. I still see myself inside my head as a 17-year-old.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's not just me. That's class, right? Okay.
I'm still a child, like.
And somewhere in my head, I'm great at football. I'm a magic singer. I'm like, all the young ones fancy me. I'm perfect inside my head, right? And when someone says to me, "Look, you're a 61-year-old granda," I'm like, what?
Yeah,
that can't be true, you know. But it's you know, in actual fact, the real life is better than the imaginary one. Does that make sense? I mean, yeah. I wouldn't trade 17-year-old football player and pulling the young ones Bob for Bobby Boo, the granddad, who gets to hold these unbelievable kids who I don't know. I don't know if you can love things beyond your capacity to love, but it feels like I just love them to a depth that I couldn't have comprehended when I was a youngster. That love could fit. There was love that big. So it's yeah, so it's amazing.
So like you're very faith-based. So with those experiences of your grandchildren, does your faith play a part in that as well, or?
Yeah, even when I had my own kids, there was I actually don't think you can look at a new baby and not believe that there's something bigger than you. So I would look at my own babies when they arrived, and look, they were all, in some way, they were all tricky births, which is why I have 5 kids. And like the first guy, who's now 39, had his cord wrapped around his neck. My daughter didn't breathe for 7 minutes. The twins, one of them arrived on a trolley on the way into the hospital, and the other arrived 6 minutes later. And the last fella had an infection in his blood. So all their arrivals into this world were a bit kind of
traumatic.
Some kind of trauma, or, you know, something where you held your breath. You know, those moments were like, ugh! And like you felt like you didn't let it go till they were 21, but you're like, ugh! And then watching them and look, because of that, you get very intent on detail, and you're looking at tiny fingers and tiny toes, and you know, you're kind of like, I remember looking at one of them, and they had like a downy hair, and a lot of new babies have this. It's like a downy kind of furry hair, it's almost like it's almost like a tiny fur. And I remember just looking at it, like, and I was when I had my first kid, I was 24, like, so I was young enough, you know. So when I had my last kid, I wasn't even 30, so they were
Jesus,
they were slapped together, you know. But
yeah,
I remember looking at them going like, oh my God, I'm actually going to start crying telling you this. I don't know why. It's like, I remember just thinking, God, they are so beautiful and so perfect. And it was a moment where you were just like, oh, can life get any better than this? And I would have held that for those 30 years. And then I held one of my grandkids, and I'm like, yeah, life can get better than that. It's like, here's the next generation of you, who, like, you can, even when you look at them, you can see you. Like, you can see, like, we've just had a grandson, like 4 granddaughters and a grandson. And he came out, and I don't, you know, obviously for people listening on the radio, my ears kind of flop over a little bit at the top. Right. This young fella's ears flop over a little bit at the top. And I'm like, he's got his granddad's ears, right? Just like,
deadly.
And just the excitement and that generational. I mean, this is probably, Graham, in answer to your question, this is probably where the faith thing comes in, because, like, my dad used to say this, and I love it. He said, God has no grandchildren. Okay. And what he meant by that is that Scripture seems to be clear that we've all got to find our own relationship with God, that he calls us his children, right? So the fact that my old man and old lady had a relationship with God, I couldn't go, hey, well, they know him, so I know him. My dad said, no, get to know him yourself, because he hasn't got grandchildren. He only has children. So So that kind of, there's only, God and his kids. There's no God and his kids' kids. It's like, he's like, find me yourself. And I think my journey in life has been finding that relationship for myself with him, where I knew him intimately, like not as a religion, 100% as a relationship. And that's, for me, is the difference. It's like, when I say to people like that Jesus is my friend, I genuinely think of him as like a friend. Like, so I kind of go, like, I'll ask him about it, or I tell him about it, or, I'll see what he thinks about it. So that it's that intimate. So it's not even a pious, and I let him down sometimes. The way you let friends down, and you're like, you're kind of going, no, he didn't turn up to my party. Like, I let him down a load. I can honestly say he's never let me down, which he's a good friend. And it's finding him in that space, and the little things in life would have brought me to that, like the magic and the miracle of kids, the miracle of love and finding someone that loves you, the miracle of being fed and watered every day. Like, the three of us are chatting here. We're all clearly in comfortable and warm rooms. We're well looked after. Someone loves us. That's a miracle. That's not everyone's lot in life in the world. That's not, everyone doesn't get that. We did that.
It's mad because, Bob, I often, anytime I've been in your company and the conversation goes to kind of faith-based or whatever, like, admittedly, I don't have a faith. I don't follow religion. And it's like, I just don't.
Yeah.
And when I'm in your company and even listening to you there for the last few minutes, like, I'm not turned off by it. I don't know what it is about you. And, I think it's the way you talk about it and articulate it it's a lovely story. Whereas sometimes I find religion quite preachy.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think not to blow smoke up your arse, but it's like you deliver it in
Holy smoke up my arse.
Yeah. But it's like you deliver it, that's just like a story. And, we myself and Danny did the Suicide or Survival workshop with you many years ago. And the message that you had in that was love.
Yeah.
And it's, me and Danny left that uplifted. We were like, what the fuck? Like, that was, so where do you think, in terms of mental health and recovery and stuff, do you think, I'm sorry, not do you think, how do you separate when you are counseling people? How do you separate faith from it if they're not faith, if they're not faith-based?
Well, I think what you feel, what yourself and Danny feel from me, I don't actually talk about faith, do I? I don't actually. No. So I don't actually separate them, because I don't think, I don't have a faith life and a Bob life and a work life, and I just have a life, and faith is quite a big part of that. And you said a great thing, Graham. So you kind of remember now what I said, because when you're saying this, that's the kernel of the thing. It's like you said, like, you've heard religion, and it's, I'm not pushing something on you, not pushing a story on you, right? So, and that, the mistake, I think the church, and by the word the church, I use that as a generic word for religion, okay? The mistake the church has made, that they assume that God has made them the moral compass for the world. Does that make sense? So they're going, here's where you're going wrong. Here's my list of things you shouldn't be doing, right? So you did that, and you did that, and you did that, so you're not one of us, right? Whereas the gospel is actually called the good news story, right? Now, there is no good news in telling someone they're wrong, is there? That's not good news. Like, if I come into you and say, you're doing that wrong, you're not going to say, well, Bob was here with the good news, I'm getting it all wrong. That's not good news, right?
Yeah.
The good news is that God loved us so much, could see that we're getting it wrong, that he had to find a solution for that so that we could talk to him. And that solution is called Jesus. Right? That's what the good news is that Jesus said, I'll take the rap for all these people. So it'd be like the three of us committed a massive crime, right? The Razzers got us. We end up in court. The judge says, these three guys are guilty. And someone stands up and goes, I'll go to jail instead of them. And we're going like, what? We don't deserve that. He's going, no, I love these lads. Let me do this. We've got 3 sentences. I'll take them all. And then the judge go, well, if you do the sentence, these lads can go free. And when we walk out of the court, and he goes to jail. And that's the story of the gospel. And that's an incredible story, isn't it? So when you present that, rather than this is what you're doing wrong, Okay. And then the piece about getting it wrong and doing things wrong. Yeah, there are things that I believe a faith-filled person wouldn't do. Okay. And here's where that comes from. So, and this is a long way of explaining this. So the way when I met Karen first, so my first wife passed away. About a year and a half later, I met this extraordinary girl, fell in love with her. She fell in love with me. Don't know how that happened. There's another miracle, another reason for love. I got two amazing women in my life. God loves me. And so I had to get used to Karen's new ways. Okay. So I, as you know, was a banker, okay, an ex-banker. So I would always button my shirt up to the second button. So I thought one button open, that's kind of wild and cool. Okay. But Karen was like, no, open that second button. Okay. So she'd open it. And then when she wasn't watching, I'd close it because I was like, that's a bit wild. Keep that one shut. Okay. So I hated opening that button. But because I loved her, I started opening that button. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it wasn't because she told me I had to. It was because I'm like, she loves me and that makes her happy. And if I can make her happy by doing that simple act, then I'll do it. So the life I live for God isn't because he's beating me with a stick. It's because I'm going, he took my sentence. So he loves me. So he deserves the best of me. And that's where my faith comes from. So the best of me is given in love to him, not by act of fear. And in answer your question, Graham, like here's what I've come to believe in when I counsel people, because in those years since we met, I qualified as a therapist as well. So that's another change in my life. I've come to understand that we only have two emotions, right? So we talk about all these, I have this, I feel that, like we have two emotions. One is fear and the other one is love. And they cannot coexist. Okay. So all I ever bring to people is whatever you're feeling now is a fear. So like if people fear the relationship is going to end, they're not going to have money, fear that people don't love them, fear that they won't be good enough, fear. And I can see behind you, Graham, on your wall says, love yourself today. Right.
Yeah.
And if you dared to imagine that by loving yourself today would push out some of the fear in your world, it would change your world unbelievably, right? And that there's a great philosopher called Robin Showett, and he expresses that like two emotions, love and fear. And everyone on the course is going, oh, that's amazing. Robin Showett came up with that. He's an incredible guy, right? Let me tell you this. It says in the Bible that perfect love casts out all fear. And who is perfect love, right? And when you look in scripture, there's a chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, that outlines what love is. Now, this is so people read it at their weddings and they can go, love is patient, love is kind, love is not self-obsessed, love doesn't hold records, keeps no list of right and wrongs. And you're going like, did I actually ever love anyone in my life? Did I ever? When it gets to the bit, love is not puffed up, you're like, okay, fail. So the only one that's ever done that is Jesus. He's the only one who ever loved perfectly. Mm. So for me, I kind of go, what casts out all fear? Just the presence of Jesus. And it's not even a holy thing. It's just a sense of his love. You're kind of going, sure, what would I be afraid of? Like there's a guy here who chose to die for me because he loved me that much. And that is a lot of stuff to kind of make you feel good and just make you want to do good and make you want to share. See, the gospel shouldn't be like you do it our way and then you belong. It should be this. You belong. Then I'll tell you something and then you'll believe. And if you believe, then you'll behave. So the church in historically, we're like, you behave, right? If you do it this way, then you're one of us and then you'll belong. I think the gospel was always the other way around. Jesus let guys hang out with him who were weirdos, wackos, like all the madsers. He got all the madsers. Like the three of us would have been picked up by Jesus. He would have picked the three of us, I know for sure. Where's the two maddest heads in Dublin? Danny Graham and Bob. We would have been apostles, right? So because he didn't choose anything fantastic. Like he didn't pick the philosophers or the scientists or the clever guys or the good-looking guys. He picked fishermen. Like blokes who hadn't a score in life. Man, follow me, I'll show you a new way. And he did. And then those 12 guys went on to change the world. Just like that's when you kind of think Christian faith, they're the guys who spread it. And how do they spread it? By just saying, hey, we met a guy who loved us and he changed our world. And for me, obviously, don't pull out the Bible in every counseling session, but there's that piece that there's like, if I can speak to someone in love and listen to them with love, in the version that I know is not, isn't puffed up, doesn't keep a record of right and wrongs, is there for you. Because love is never about me. It's always about the other person. And if we all loved that way, I think it'd be a much safer, happier, freer world. I just think it'd be a great place to live, wouldn't it?
There's, absolutely. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, Bob. There's a real sincerity in how you speak about this, and I'd be the same as Graham. I wouldn't be a religious person. I don't even think I'd class myself as a spiritual person or whatever. I'm not smart enough to understand what goes beyond me, but I'm smart enough to accept there more than likely is something. You look out into the universe and think this is it. I'm not sure, but I'm fascinated by how and people who are listening to this are probably thinking the lads have lost their mind. This is not the way these episodes normally go, and that's part of the beauty of this as well, because it is a different conversation. It's a completely different pitch, completely different pace, but we're not scripted. We don't have notes. We just go with the flow.
Brilliant.
But as you're saying all this, somewhere in my brain it's going, see, that sounds like something that you could kind of go, yeah, all right, okay, I see where you're coming from. Yeah, okay, I can see why people get on board with that. And then Philippines 1:13. Sorry, I don't know.
Corinthians 1 Corinthians 13. Yeah.
So the love doesn't keep a record, all that kind of stuff. As you're saying that, instantly in my head, I'm going, there's an awful lot of people who claim to be Christian in the world, and I'm jumping across the Atlantic to America and certain elements of Christianity that you see, who definitely keep score and definitely do that thing that you're saying, where it's, if you don't do it this way, it's not the Christian way.
You're one of the devil's children.
And it's as that sincerity that I'm getting, that I'm picking up on. As
Danny, in defense of our American cousins, we have people like that in Ireland as well. Just for the record.
Listen, they come in all shapes and sizes. They come everywhere. But it's I'm fascinated by that kind of the contrast between you being very laid back, comfortable, and sincere about how you're saying, like, look, this is how I see it, and this is how I use it to tell people you're lovely, you're lovable, you're loved. And you jump to the other people, and it's kind of like there's a big difference there, like.
And it's sad, and this is probably, and if you can get sad on God's behalf, this is where I do go, because I see those people that you're talking about as well. I see people who use religion and faith and fear to inveigle money out of people, to get poor people to give them you give me your $5, you'll have $10 by the end of the week. But for sure, I'll have a jet by the end of the month, is what they don't tell you, right? Like, so I see that and that. And I go back to, so the faith that I subscribe to, we call ourselves Christians, okay? And the clue is in the first half of the name is Christ, right? The IAN means I follow him and what he does. That's so whatever an IAN, if it's after anything, that's I follow that and do what that does, okay? So in my interactions with people, you kind of go, is that Christ-like? Okay, so you go, and we've got 4 Gospels which show us how he lived his life. So like he even has a verse where he's talking about asking people to come to his knowledge, and it says this. Now listen to this. It says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man opens the door and lets me in, I will come in and sup with him." Right? So all you see in that is a gentleman, right? I'm standing at your door. I'm knocking. If you open the door and ask me in, I'll come in, right? Most faith versions are like, hello, we're outside your door, we're going to kick it in, and we're going to storm your house for Jesus, right? And they're going like, and Jesus going like, I never did it that way, right? There's another story where he's sitting at a well, gagging for a little drink of water. Some woman comes along to get water, and he says, give us a drink. And then this conversation starts with her. And she goes, what are you doing talking to me? Like, I'm from Samaria. You shouldn't even talk to me. You're from Israel. And he's going, no, well, look, I just want, if you knew who you were talking to, you'd ask me for water. I'll give you to drink, and you'll never thirst again. And what he was saying is, I could give you something, so every longing you've ever had in your life will be fulfilled. Anything you've ever desired will be quenched. if you knew who I was. And she says something lippy. And then he goes, well, you say, well, that you don't have a husband, but you've had 5 husbands. And she's like, he knows everything about me, right? So he knew this woman was hopping from relationship to relationship, and probably what we'd call now, she was a bed hopper, right, or a slapper. Like, honestly, like, if you can think what the church would call that woman, right? Did he say that? No. He said, give us a drink. Yeah. Well, I would have given you a drink if you. So there was he didn't hop in and judge people. He was like, he met you where you are, right? Yeah. So and look, I always say to people, like, when I share my faith, I'm not trying to make someone believe what I believe. Like, most days I'm trying to make myself believe what I believe. So I wouldn't ever say, hey, come over here. I wouldn't be that arrogant to say, come over here, I'm right. But all I can tell people is, hey, it works for me. It sustained me through the death of a wife. Like, you're kind of going, like, how do you get through that? Because I knew A, Jesus was holding me, and I knew B, all the people who believed that Jesus was holding me were also holding me. So you had this, and people can't see it on, but I was telling you earlier about this fireplace in my dad's house, where it's made up of all these individual stones holding each other up. And that cement that holds each brick in place was the love of God, my dad used to say, because it was his visual sermon that he'd say, listen, we've all got our part to play. And I think that's, when we were kids, we used to sing a song, and this is like Sunday school, so I was like, don't know why this is coming into my head, but it just said this, Jesus bids us shine like a pure, clear light. Is that what this is? My man says, turns out I'm on the 6 o'clock news tonight. Sure, we're going to have to live through the 10 bongs or whatever comes out.
That's all right, yeah. Big Ben in the background, yeah.
Well, anyway, so I suppose that piece where I'm kind of going, okay, that's the reality of my faith. It's not a religion. It's a way of life. And like, you guys know me, like, I'm not, like, I'm kind of crazy. Do you know what I mean? I'm not like your
nice crazy.
Yeah, but I'm not like, oh, here comes religious Bob. I hope maybe it's art.
No, absolutely not. And that's the point. Yeah. But that's the point, Bob, because let's face it, like, since the scandals in the 90s with the Catholic Church, I think they've lost their grip on society, and like, even with kind of maybe progressive views on marriage equality and abortion and transgender and stuff like that. I mean, people, you said it there, that about the well story, like, people take people are taking stories from the Bible and they're translating it to what they think. I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in the Bible it says that a woman and a woman can't love each other, or a man can't love each other. Like, there's something like that in the Bible, is there?
Well, there is, and there's all sorts of, there's things you can take and quote and say, there's where it says this, right? And here's what I'd say to you, Graham, right? I always say to people, like, the most important part of faith isn't what's right and what's wrong, what's allowed and what's not allowed. That's the moral compass, okay? What is important is back to this story of the buttons on your neck, right? So what is important is that people get to know him first, right? And I always say, it's such a personal relationship. You find out what God has for you. You ask him. Like, so if that's your relationship and you come in like that to him, you get to know him and ask him, is that button okay, right? And I honestly, he will clearly tell you, because it's not like I'm a pastor of a church, so I don't tell people how to live their lives. I say, hey, it says this in scripture. I want you to go home, pray about it, read it, study it yourself, ask God to talk to you. And he does. It's not like, okay, Graham, today we're going to Lidl. It's not that kind of, it's like, because he goes to Aldi. It's not like that at all. It's like, come and get to know me, and let's walk together. Like, let me. So it'd be kind of, so the question you've asked me, and I'm not diving into the question. I'm just saying that would be like if I met you in the street, right? And say you were in muddy Wellingtons, you'd muck all over you, you'd driven the wheelchair through paint, right? And I was like, oh, I can't bring him to my house now. He'll drive that all over the place. He'll get paint everywhere. He'll get shitty boots everywhere. The place is going to be destroyed. I won't ask him. Or I could say, do you want to go back to my gaff? And when we get there, you might go, "Oh, Rob, I want to take off these boots," or "Look, just be careful." You know, so you find when you get to the place what's acceptable and what's not. Does that make sense? So it's like you kind of when you see who I am and where I am. Now, if you look in and there's paint all over the floor and muck, you go, "Hey, it's okay. I can do it. I can come in." Right? But if you kind of go, "Hey, your man's got like white carpet in there. I better take the boots off." And I think that I always say to people, like, get to know him first, find your way with him, understand the amount of love he has for you, and then let him, you know, like quite often you find people major against the things that they don't do. Does that make sense? So they'd be very strong on, "Oh, there would be none of that in our church." And then you go, "What about backbiting?" "Oh, okay." Or what about thieving? Or what about bitching? Or what about money? There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that people kind of forget to say, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's like it says, if don't go into church if you have hatred in your heart against anyone. And yet there are people sitting in churches who hate people in the gay community. And you're like, yeah, that's hatred. It's not. And "Oh, we don't hate the sinner, we hate the sin." And you're like, really?
Yeah.
If you walked in, what would you feel like? Would you be different? You know, like you have people in churches who are racist, and you're kind of going like, "Man, you don't tell me about the relationships I'm in with someone out here. You're a racist."
Yeah.
So, like, the problem I think really with faith, and I think this, you know, Graham and Danny, I think the two of you, like, you're in a generation that's like sick of it. You're sick of all that sanctimonious, hollow, untrue. Doesn't really, like, your generation can really, like, you're. I wouldn't use the word woke because I think that's kind of, you're awake. Like, your bullshit detectors are very, very, they're very sensitive. Like, you're like, that doesn't make sense. You can't say that. Like, I mean, you know, I remember talking to Joe Duffy, and he was talking about, he introduced Bishop Eamon Casey and Father Liam Cleary, or Father Joe Cleary, is it?
Michael Cleary.
Michael Cleary. So he interviewed Bishop Casey and Michael Cleary at the youth mass in Galway when the Pope came to Ireland in '79. And Joe says, "And I was the only one on stage with no children." I was like, so you kind of go like, and the hypocrisy behind that. So your generation going like, that's hypocrisy. Like, we're not, you know. So and look, even in my, like, I'm what would be known as a born again evangelical Christian, but even in my brand of faith, there's the chancers as well. Like, so I'm not saying, "Oh, all our guys are good." I'm saying, listen, and I have the potential to be one of those guys. Honestly, I have to keep myself, I have to keep an eye on myself, because I could become judgmental, and I could become, "Oh, I'm better than everyone else." And I really have to ask God, keep me humble, keep me close to you, because it's all about him. It's not about me. It's like so, like, until they start having a religion called Robertians, when all the people start following me, like, then I have to defer to Christ, because he's the head of the church. So he's like, well, if I'm not following what he's doing, then I'm off piece. Like, I'm making up my own stuff. And I think that's, like, I often think sometimes when Jesus comes down and he looks at the amount of different religions, he goes like, "Look, was anyone listening?" But I think, and that's why I keep coming back to the space of love, because I think, you know, when it talks about, if you talk about the major verse in the scripture that will be taught about you, it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him won't perish but would have everlasting life." And that's love. God so loved. And then it says, "What greater love has a man got than he lays down his life for his friends?" That's love. You know, and it says, "Beloved, I love you now, so I want you to be with me." So so the three king verses, it's not about, "Beloved, if you get everything right, you'll be okay with me, and the beatings will stop." There's no verse that says that. It just says, like, "I loved you enough to die for you." So kind of, if I was to sum up my life, I would probably say he loved me enough to die for me, so I love him enough to live for him. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a nice way of putting it. It's a very nice way of putting it.
That's and look, 100%, lads, I don't always get it right.
Yeah.
I think 20% of the time. And here's the great thing, and this is the miracle of Jesus. So, and if I can explain it this way, when God looks on us, he just sees people who are wrong, right? He's looking down going, they're a mess. And he's very holy. So he couldn't let us into his presence because he's too holy for us, right? And that's why Jesus died. And it kind of says that we get covered in Jesus. So when God looks from heaven, he doesn't see messy Bob. He just sees Jesus. And he goes, well, he's okay. He can come in. So I kind of go in under the covering of Jesus, if that makes sense. So it'd be like, when we were kids and your dad lifted you over the turnstile getting into the match.
Yeah.
He paid the ticket, but you got in under the cover of his ticket kind of thing, right? So that's kind of how we get into God's presence, is under the cover of Jesus. He's paid the price. So he's like, yeah. And God goes, you want with Jesus. And that's how you get in. And so it's nothing that you can do. I always say to this, and look, remember this always. There's nothing you can do that will make God love you less. And there's nothing you can do that will make God love you more.
Yeah.
Well,
live your life in that space.
And that's like, I'm kind of taken aback a bit, because if Mero had said to me at 7:15, by the way, Dan, this is going to be a half hour where we talk about faith, we talk about religion and all that, I'd have been like, Mero, fuck off. I can't do it. But as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm kind of like, oh, this is a nice conversation. I'm having yet another Bob Carley experience where, listening to you chat, I'm feeling a little bit uplifted, and I'm feeling like ultimately the message here is positive. And rather it's coming from a religious space or a faith-filled space, rather it's coming from just I'm looking out for me brother space or whatever.
Yeah.
It's one that's well-meaning, and it's one that's full of love.
Yeah.
And I remember there a couple of years ago when you led the celebration of John Pender's life.
Oh yeah.
And it remains to this day one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever been to, in terms of just, I'd never experienced that like it. Usually funerals in Ireland can be a bit dour and a bit, but that day, seeing the amount of people from the community who came out to support Caroline and the family, and then yourself and the other speakers and everything, wasn't a tap of, I'm using air quotes here, religion involved, but it was
love.
It was love, and it was uplifting, and it was amazing. It was genuinely, I know, like I said to people afterwards when we were leaving and that kind of thing, and people were like, geez, like, I've never left a funeral feeling good. And
look, and I think, Dan,
well said, Danny.
Yeah, and honestly, and I think that's the secret. And Graham said it. I love John Pender, and I adored Caroline McGuigan. Do you know, I actually love the two of them with all my heart. And I hope that what people felt was that love that we shared. And myself and Caroline and John and the expression of that. And I just think love comes from God, and that's why it was easy for me to step into that space. And and sometimes people say don't mention God when you're talking, but you don't have to. So like it's like, so I it was an honor and hard, because I just want to sit there crying, to be honest with you. So it wasn't easy to kind of, and I remember even the Coldplay song when he was leaving with the lights, and that came to me. I was praying, Lord, just guide me what to say about this great man, and this horrific loss and the impact on Caroline, and like, she's such a good woman who was doing so much for the community, and it was just the injustice of it was like, and I was angry with God, to be honest with you. I was kind of like, well, because I didn't understand it. I still don't. And so I just hope that the love showed, and like John's love is still impacting the world. I know that, and Caroline's is as well. So
absolutely.
So it was looking, and I think as well, being there, seeing people who knew, we would have all known each other, and just that community would very like the stones in the fireplace, wasn't it? Like, we were there all doing our piece to keep it all together on that day, and just to be there with that family, because it was, and I kind of know what it's like to suddenly lose someone. So there's a piece of my own empathy that was like, I know what it's like. No, what Jean didn't die in the horrific circumstances that John died, but it was like, it was as sudden, which was like, and I think that love, even that's another expression of love, so it's kind of like, and really, the real test of love is like, it's easy to love when it's good, isn't it? It's easy to, when it's all going well, it's easy to love. It's not easy to love when, someone's dying of cancer, or someone, like, or when you're called to love someone who did something horrific, like I had some terrible things happen to me when I was a kid, right? And I distinctly remember praying one night about it and being told, well, love is the answer. And I remember having to love that person through my pain and finding real peace in it. Like, honestly, like it's an extraordinary, and someday we'll have a conversation, maybe not online, and I'll tell you the whole piece of it. But it was the most extraordinary circumstance where you say, how could love work in that space? But it does. It's like, because love casts out fear. So the two emotions you feel in every situation is fear or love. And if I let the love in, the fear dissipates. In fact, sometimes the fear disappears. So, like when Dad passed away, he was a real man of God, a man of faith. And, he had this family verse that he actually, well, I'll just show you. It's weird because I'm in my mom's house, so I'm just looking straight over where the laptop is, and there's a picture of my dad, and I was about to tell you that he used to quote this verse to us all, which was Romans 8:28, right? Which is a verse that says this: that all things work together for good for those that love God and are called onto his purpose. So it's not some things, it's not many things, it's all things. So that's the good and the bad, that they're working for your good. So I don't know if you can see this picture, but that's my mom and dad.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And see what's written at the top?
Love never fails.
Love never fails. And down at the bottom is
Romans 8:28.
And that's his verse. So I always say to people, like, they say, why do you talk about love all the time? And I said, you know what? When I was growing up, I was marinated in love. So if you're cooking something and it's like you soak something, like, sure, what hope have you got? It's gonna seep out somewhere. So I said, no, I was marinated in love growing up, and that's so Dad, when he was passing away, obviously it was in the middle of COVID, and his only worry was that he would be alone. Right? He was like, don't bring me to hospital. I don't want to be on my own. I don't want to be on my own. And I said, Dad, we'd pray about it. Like, God will find a way. God will find a way. And I said, and even if we're not there, you won't be on your own, because he'll be with you. And he went, I want all my family around my bed, because in scripture, like when the old patriarchs died, they always, and the family gathered around the bed of Abraham, and he put his hand on the head and bless, there's like, you can imagine the scene, and the angel of the Lord came. So I think of me to his head, he kind of thought, so I brought him to hospital. I actually think he died in my car twice on the way over to the Beacon Hospital, right? So I was like, Dad, you all right? And he was like, I said, Dad, not now. No, come on back here. And so got him into the hospital, and they said, look, his kidney and his heart are failing, right? So, and then it started a 3-week journey for Dad towards Dad's last day. And on the first day, he was brought in his own, right? And then we weren't allowed to visit him. Right, so we would ring him and do a favor, and he was kind of okay. He was bright enough, like, And then I said to the hospital one day, "Do you think a visit from Ma'am would cheer him up?" And the doctor said, "I think that would be good." Right, so I brought Ma'am up, and she was masked up and disinfected. And then she got in, and she saw him for an hour. Then she came out, and then I said to the doctor, "And look, my brother's over from England tomorrow. he's and he may not be back to see Dad. Certainly bring him up, let him." So Jim was brought over, and he was disinfected, Roddy, and he got to see Dad, and then we went up, and they start getting to know us. And then the nurse said to me, well, you can come in with Jim. So I got in to see him, right? Oh, I needed stuff signed. I needed his pension signed. So they said, well, you come up and get him to sign it. I got in. And then, the long story is that as the week went on, we got to know the hospital team so well. They got to love us. They got to love Dad in the way he spoke about God. There was a nurse working in the ward who believed what we believe, was 100% committed to her faith. She would pray with Dad every night. He told Mum he had an angel. We were telling Mum, Dad's had to get himself a nurse in the Beacon. and then he started to deteriorate. And what happened at the end, when Dad passed away, he had his 6 kids and his wife around the bed. The hospital and we were there for 48 hours. It wasn't like just come in at the last minute. Yeah, we got to be with him, and we got to, like, we did communion. So our communion would be, when we do communion, because it says in scripture, do this in memory of me. So it's more to represent that kind of his crucifixion as a body. So we would do it quite liberally with it. So there's no the priest has to serve it. We would be quite comfortable in ourselves, and so it's more a commemoration and breaking it together and celebrating that piece. So Dad said he wanted to have communion with his kids before he passed away. So you love this story. So where do you get bread in the middle of a pandemic in a hospital? So I had to run out, right, and across the road to what's the crowd who makes subs? What's that place called? Subway. There was a Subway facing the Beacon Clinic, right? And I go over, and there's a guy on the desk. I said, "Can I have a piece of bread, please?" And he goes, "What flavor?" I said, "Any flavor." He said, "No, what flavor are you going to have?" The pecan, whatever, loads of them, and I was like, "Give me the piece of bread." And he goes, "What do you want on it?" I said, "I don't want that on it. I just want the bit of bread." I said, "We want it for communion." He goes, "You must have something on it." I said, "Well, how do you mean?" He said, "You have to have a," and he named the thing that a ham surprise, whatever they all are, right? And I said, "Okay." I said, "Give me the ham surprise, but don't put anything on it. Just the bread, right?" And then he goes, $4.99. Anyway, so got that, brought it back over to the hospital. I say for the first time in living memory, communion was Jesus was potato and pistachio flavor or something. It was like, and I got Ribena out of a vending machine, and we did communion, and it was like I can't even describe the amount of love that was in the room. It was like Dad's love for God, God's love for him, his love for Mom, our love for each other.
The way he wanted it.
Oh yeah. So there's how I see God in everyday things. It's like he didn't want to be on his own. He wanted to feel close to God. And look, when death isn't always pretty, right? So it wasn't, right? And it was a bit traumatic, to be honest with you. And my mother, who was 90 at the time, right? Now listen to this. So you got the 6 kids. We're like, what just happened? Right? That kind of like, I wish I hadn't seen that. And it was like 4:00 in the morning. And my 90-year-old mother goes, "Okay, before we leave this room, everyone has to thank God for one thing that you're really blessed by when you're dad." Right? So we're like, so I'm like, I can't even remember what I prayed. I think I said, I'm blessed by his love and his constant care for the family. I want to thank you, God, for that. My sister was, I want to thank you for his kindness and his, brother's like his righteousness. So in 10 minutes, the 6 was listed like beauty. Okay. And the awful thing we'd seen was forgotten. There's love casting out fear. And it was my 90-year-old mother's idea.
Brilliant.
There's love casting out fear. Oh.
Yeah.
That's mad.
It's simple.
Yeah.
When the message is there, like anytime I've done the workshop with you or I've been to your talks, or there's always a natural kind of punchline to the end that it's not scripted, so to speak.
Yeah.
And like,
I'd love to think that I wrote them, but I don't. They genuinely, that's.
But you've just done it again, like.
They fall. Yeah.
You've just, like, every experience I have with you is uplifting. I'm not even religious. I don't think I will ever be religious, and I don't think you're even offended by such language like that. But every time I'm in your company,
I hope neither of us will ever be religious.
yeah. Fair enough. I remember the first 2 times I was in your company, and it was only the 3rd time where you said about your faith. And I remember thinking, Jesus, I didn't think that. Like, and I wasn't looking down on you or anything. It was I didn't think that. That's mad.
Yeah.
But like, there again, another uplifting experience, and that the message there, the fear was in the room. Your father was passing away. Your mother instructed to reflect on your father and give thanks. And the fear is gone, and you're leaving with love.
Yeah.
How fucking powerful is that? Like,
yeah.
And Graham, honestly, I never thought of that on we talked tonight. I've never reflected that was what happened. I knew it was amazing, but I was like, what was that? But that's clearly what it was. It was the love cast out the fear. It was like, yeah.
You can't have both. So you have to get rid of
You
one.
can't. You can't. So like put that thought into relationships. So say you're in a relationship. Like women are like, he might leave me. He might leave me. What's that?
Fear.
That's fear, right? But if you go, he loves me, and he's going, I love you. There's no room for that fear, right? Like people are thinking, oh, my kids are like, they're all going to end up on gear and drug addicts. Like you kind of go, what can I do? Well, I lock them. You kind of just love them. Like, and sometimes loving's not easy. Sometimes your kids are shits. Like, like they'll do things that break your heart. But you got to love them. You can't stop loving them. Because like anger will never bring them back. Ever.
Yeah.
Meanness will never bring back. Like separation will never. What? The only thing that attracts people is love. Like, you can't be attracted to anger. It's impossible. So it's a force that's like, it's so God-centered. I think we don't understand it. It is like, and it's funny now. And I'll challenge this. Like in the next couple of days, look, that after the conversation we've had, watch how many songs you hear that have the word love in it. When you're going,
Bob, it happened the last time I was in your company. Honest to God, happened the last time, and I was in Dunstars and Carl's Guard, and I was like, "There's another song."
There you go. It's
and like, you just kind of think about it, but not only that, like you think it kind of coincidence, fate, whatever, it happens anyway, and it changes your mood. Like, you're kind of
when you say coincidences, I tell you what my dad said, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. It's like, so you're like, So I think you both know I got a new job. You know that, don't you? I got a job.
Yeah.
So I'm the global wellness advocate for PayPal, right?
And what does that entail, Bob?
So if I was asked to describe in one word, and I say this, I have the privilege of speaking into people's heads and hearts in PayPal. Okay, so PayPal are very cognizant of the fact that when you bring your whole self to work, that includes everything, including your mental health, right?
Yeah.
And there's 40,000 of us, and in the 40,000, by the law of averages, right? Well, it's probably higher now. You could kind of say more than half of us are struggling with something, right?
Yeah.
And if you're not, you will be. So I always say, look, this is a great market because it never, the mental health space, like it's very hard to get everyone like in the daisies on the same day, right? So half will be in the daisies, the rest will be in the shit to put on the daisies, to make the daisies grow, because that's what it is, really. That's life, So, and I always say, for me in my faith walk, when I'm in the daisies, I forget about God, right? That's the truth. That's like, so when it's going well, I'm like, I can do this on my own, not a bother. Oh, don't need him. I can rock this without him, right? When the wind is against me, I'm like, Jesus, are you there? Are you there? You need a bit of a dig out here. So I always kind of go, I've grown more in my faith in tough times than I do in good times, which I'm sure drives God mad, because he's going to go, I wish I could just let you kind of be in the good space. I don't have to tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, but like even in sport, like Shamrock Rovers, they always say the match doesn't take place on match day, it takes place in the training, doesn't it? That's when the skills are honed and the good stuff happens is in the training ground. So even if they, sometimes they got to go, and this is straight off the training ground, you're kind of going, oh, we prepared for this. So our faith is kind of like that. Like life is like the training ground. He's getting us ready. And if we listen to the trainer, listen to what he's doing in that way, and he's only ever going to shout out one command. It's like, love more. And here's the thing, love unconditionally. And that's the hardest part. Because most love is given at a price, isn't it? Most people, I love you if. We got to try loving people without an if. I just love you. I just love you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you don't love me back. It doesn't matter if we're not getting on. It doesn't matter. Like to the extreme, like we got to love people like Putin.
That's going to be a tough sell, Bob. I won't lie. It's going to be a tough sell.
Tough sell. But here's the thing, what's ever going to change him? Do you know what I mean? No, I'm not saying it's easy to love him.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if he could see, actually, if I loved people rather than me, because Russia lives on fear, doesn't it? That's how it's covered, it's through fear, right? Imagine if I governed through love and was like, wow, that would be a mess.
There's a lot of what you're saying, and I can't remember if I first heard this from yourself or Keith Kelly, who is another friend of the show and a brilliant human. But it's the story of I think it was two monks who are part of a monastery where they don't speak, And I'm not going to do the story justice here, but they're out in a storm one day and they see a woman who needs help. And one monk goes over and he talks to her and he helps her, all that kind of thing. They carry on down the road, and then another monk, the second monk, says to him, I can't believe you did that, by the way. I'm like, you've broken every vow we have and all. The other one goes, that was 20 minutes ago. You're still carrying that woman.
You're still carrying her,
let her go, you know. And there's a lot of what you're saying that I think is embedded in that message as well, that piece around love unconditionally, you know. And it's something that the older I get, the more I try to kind of, and even like conversation with my wife or whatever, you know, and she'd be annoyed about something or I'd be annoyed about something, but ultimately I always kind of come to the same thing of, there's nothing in carrying that into tomorrow, like, you know, just because today was a shit day doesn't mean I have to carry it into tomorrow and make tomorrow a shit day too. If somebody did something, somebody did something. Don't move along. It's not worth it. It's not worth carrying that. You know,
I always get Bob. I always get the message, or I always get, not always, but sometimes more frequent than not, I would get thrown at me, how am I so positive? Positive. Like, because they think I'm suffering. They think as I'm sitting in a chair that I'm somehow.
What drives your positivity?
I don't know. I resonated with what Danny said there, and that what's the point in bringing something into the next day? Like it evoked me to say that comment about people always they're not giving out, but sometimes it can be patronizing, saying, "Oh, how come you're always positive?" As if I'm being fake or whatever. You know? I don't know what I think my upbringing drives my positivity. You know,
very similar to the point Bob made earlier.
What would you say was poured into you, Graham, when you were growing up?
What was poured into me? Love.
You can't lose, man. Like, you're marinated in love as well.
Yeah.
We're on the same meat counter.
We are.
Barbecue tidbits.
Oh, stop. Listen, Bob, thanks so much for your time. That was absolutely intriguing. I didn't know where it was going to go, and that's how me and Danny like it. And me and Danny will reflect after it and probably say, fuck me, that was deadly. It was all of anytime I meet you, it's enlightening, it's educating, it's powerful, you're just a really fucking great guy.
Yeah, you're a force of good in the world.
I hope to have that on my headstone.
Yeah. I'll write it for you, Bob.
And let's hope the two dates at the top are miles apart.
Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah, and a long way away, yeah. But yeah,
let me tell you this: your commitment to the podcast is incredible. Like, you've done it, as you say, 8 years is a long time to be doing it and finding interest and stuff to dig out and stuff to get up and stuff to get on. And so well done and congratulations. And we should talk more often. And
absolutely,
about life and listen, even off the podcast, we should meet someday for a cup of coffee and a laugh.
Definitely. Absolutely. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'd love to catch up again sooner, Bob. You're a force of good in the world, and not to make light of something, but geez, I don't know, you nearly tempted me there when you mentioned some sort of any faith that provides Subway as the bread of life. I might get on board with
it. With no fillings.
Amazing. Bob, generally, thanks so much for your time and for that.
The Church of the Latter-day Sandwich. That'll be us.
Love it.
Amazing, Bob. It's been uplifting and it's been an experience. Thanks so much for your time, man.
God bless you. Let's stay well.
I mean, what a conversation! What a man! Like, it's. I said this while recording. If you had said to me before we had our chat with Bob that we were going to be talking about Jesus, that we were going to be talking about faith, I'd most likely have come up with an excuse to be like, Mero, I can't record a podcast tonight, mate. I'm really sorry. Can we, because I can't, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not, and I'm genuinely allergic to conversations about that kind of stuff because I'm just not
into it.
But chatting to Bob there this evening, there was there's such a sincerity in him, and maybe it's because kind of I've had interactions with Bob before, not any faith based ones, just of being in this company where he's been doing his thing for either Suicide or Survive, or I watched the TED talk that he did and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's a lovely bloke, which helps, but I was not expecting us to be having a chat about faith and where it comes from and everything else. But the one thing, regardless if you believe in that kind of stuff, regardless if you don't, the one thing that I think everybody can take away from it is that, like, love wins, as Bob said. Like,
as Bob always says, like,
yeah,
as you said, I didn't go to you and say we're going to talk about religion, because
no, you didn't. No, not at all.
I didn't know we were going to go down that road. I just always have been in conversation with Bob, and every time I'm in conversation with him, it's always interesting, it's always uplifting. And even though, again, as you said, you're not religious, I'm not religious, I'm not faith-based, I don't believe in anything as such, but I respect Bob, and
Yeah.
I respect his message, and the only way I can describe it is that he always uplifts me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm going to join the church.
No, not at all. I think what I would say is he strikes me as a man who he's
just a really good man.
Yeah, and would genuinely help anyone he could.
Yeah,
he's an empathetic soul, and of great time for him. And I'm a little bit lost for words in terms of, like, I wasn't expecting to have that conversation, and I certainly, if you had told me I was having that kind of conversation, I certainly wouldn't have thought that I'd come out of it 45 minutes later in great form, feeling positive, feeling like it's, and that's maybe a credit to Bob himself. He doesn't push it on you, and as you said, like, he didn't know that the conversation was going to go that way either. It just happened to be. He mentioned that he was in his parents' house. He told us something, and then so when we hit record, the conversation naturally arced that way.
Yeah.
But he's a brilliant soul, and yeah, it was great to catch up with him after all.
But it's like you said, you referenced the great John Pender's funeral service.
Yes, yeah.
And which Bob presided over. And it was a celebration of John's life. It was beautiful. It was, again, it was one of the most uplifting experiences I've ever had. And I remember turning to my mother and saying, God forbid I go early, but if I do, get Bob Marley or Bob Carley. Bob Marley.
Get Bob Marley.
Buffalo Soldier. I said, God forbid I go early, but that I don't want, and it's now on a podcast format. It's now audio.
Yeah.
I do not want a funeral in a church. Put me in a function room in a hotel and let people like Bob or you MC it.
I'm not. I had a very similar conversation with my own parents and with Cubes, where, because I left that thinking, what, I didn't know you could do that, right?
Yeah. Same.
And two,
I didn't know you could bring a coffin to a hotel function room.
Yeah, and maybe that's just one of those things where it's the wonderful people of Fitzpatrick Castle are very accommodating at the best of times, not just because we're a hotel, lol. But it's as I said, I've never left a funeral where I felt in good mood but the experience, and I think a lot of people shared that experience, where it was a celebration of John's life, and to see how it moved people and to see how people interacted with it and everything else, it was beautiful. It was great. And I think if ever I am to go, I'd be the same as what you were saying, Mero. Keep me as far away from any building that claims to be a church or has a cross above the door.
Yeah.
And do something far more human, I think.
Agreed.
But anyway, so that's a bit of a divergence there. But that has been WTS 288. Completely different. It's not normally where we go at all. But you know what? It was a lovely conversation, and I'm glad we had it.
I'm very glad we had it.
So a big thank you to Uncle Bob Carley. Lovely man, as I said. Mero, if people want to listen to previous episodes of us and all that kind of crack, where and how can they do so?
They go to WTSpod.com or they can search WTS Pod on any podcast provider. Pod being Spotify, Podcast Republic, Apple Podcast, anywhere and everywhere you can get a podcast. You can also get us on Twitter at WTS Pod, or you can get Danny on Twitter at Danjo Murray, and you can get me on Twitter at Merrigan. And until next time,
clear eyes,
full hearts,
can't lose.
Too sweet.